Let's cut right to the chase. Hitman 3 VR Reloaded is potentially the ugliest Quest 3 game I have played to date. Remember Nintendo Wii ports of Xbox 360 and PS3 games? Well, this feels like that. A low resolution, messy, jagged, poorly lit and often genuinely shocking to look at version of Hitman 3 that originally set out to fix the issues that plagued the PSVR and PC VR versions, but has somehow ended up just creating more problems. And let me be clear, I have no issue with the attempted cel-shaded art style. That isn't the problem here. If done correctly, it could look really cool, but in its current state, the game looks more like something that's constantly struggling to render than a bold artistic choice. Now, if you know me, you'll know I don't take any pleasure in saying something like that. I always try to find the good in every game, and I will do that throughout this review, but it pains me to see a game that I love released for a platform and a medium that I love way before it was realistically ready for the spotlight. Now, that isn't to say Hitman 3 VR Reloaded isn't fun. The core gameplay of Hitman 3 is here, mostly intact and rebuilt for standalone VR. The level design, the freedom, the challenges, the cool assassinations, it's all here. So if you can fight through the abysmal presentation, you might occasionally catch yourself having a good time. But there's no doubt in my mind that this should have released no earlier than February of 2025. Hitman 3 VR Reloaded needed at least 6 more months in the oven to avoid the inevitable backlash it's about to receive, and I keep asking myself why the studio chose to push it out the door now when they must have been seeing everything that I've been seeing. Because sadly, as of right now, I can comfortably say this is the worst way to experience this particular entry in the Hitman franchise. Okay, let me level with you. I am one of an elite few who actually really enjoys Hitman 3 VR on PC. I've played it to death and I am on record saying I like it despite all of its obvious flaws. Is it a good VR game? No. Is it a good game to play in VR despite that? Yes. I have fun with Hitman 3 VR because above all else, the gameplay mechanics and structure of Hitman 3 are just really damn good, no matter how you choose to play that game. No matter how tacked on, janky and lacking the VR mechanics in the PSVR or PC versions are, the core gameplay loop is just so damn fun, engaging and replayable that I can excuse the issues and enjoy the game in a more immersive way than flat screen, despite it not being a proper VR game. Now, all of that can somewhat be applied to Hitman 3 VR Reloaded as well. Underneath the absurdly poor visuals, you can still find the core gameplay of Hitman 3 with all its fantastic level design, freedom to tackle objectives, its stealth-centric systems that can be entirely ignored, and generally just tons of replayability within the campaign's 6 story missions. If you've played Hitman 3 on any other platform, you'll be glad to know that essentially all of the base game content is here. We have the 2 tutorial levels, Dubai, Dartmoor, Berlin, Chongqing, Mendoza and the Carpathian Mountains, and within each level there are dozens of challenges, feats, story threads and unlockable items to work through, meaning you'll be playing around in these locations a handful of times each if you want to see and do everything that the game has to offer. Unlike Hitman 3 VR on PC and PSVR, however, we don't have access to the Hitman 1 and 2 levels, and unlike the flat screen version of Hitman 3, we also don't have access to any of the additional escalation missions, the elusive target mode, the freelancer mode, the arcade mode, or the sniper assassin mode. So the flat screen version still reigns supreme in terms of sheer content offering, with the PC VR and PSVR modes coming in second place, whilst the Quest version sits in last with just the base game Hitman 3 levels. But what does it feel like to play Hitman 3 VR Reloaded? Did the team at XR Games fix all of the issues levelled at the PC VR and PSVR versions? Well, the short answer is it pretty much feels identical to play this version, and no, they didn't fix the issues of the PCVR or PSVR versions. Let's run through a short list. Inventory items are still grabbed from a static flat screen menu. Climbing ladders or mantling still isn't done physically. Throwing items is still a nightmare, so you'll probably rely on the auto lock-on throw that the game provides. Interacting with many objects is still accomplished by pressing A. Reloading guns is still an automatic process initiated by a button press. You can physically grab enemies when they're dead or unconscious to initiate dragging them, but if you want to dump them in a closet, you have to press A. You can't two-hand pistols. The game menu and main screens haven't been redesigned for VR and don't work well for the medium, and honestly, the only thing that stands out to me as a positive change is the fact that you can now use both hands to wield items, shoot guns, and perform actions. Famously, in the PC VR and PSVR versions of Hitman 3, players can move their left hand around, but can't actually do anything with it. You can't pick up items, interact with anything, or fire guns with that hand. But here, you can do all those things. Although I will admit, the impact that has on gameplay is fairly minimal. The best thing it has allowed me to do that I couldn't do in any other version is hold an item in both hands and throw them both at two separate enemies at the same time, which is admittedly very cool. It's also fun if you decide to play the game in full chaos mode and start gunning down NPCs with a weapon in both hands, but it does slightly break the difficulty and balance of the game, as you can now wipe out entire levels of people without being challenged too much. Dual wielding really does make you feel like an unstoppable force, but doesn't feel like the groundbreaking step towards a true Hitman VR game that most fans were probably hoping for. So essentially, Hitman 3 VR Reloaded is a worse looking version of the PC VR and PSVR release, with less content and most of the same issues that plagued those versions and turned away many VR players from playing them. But the gameplay is still fun if you stick with it, because Hitman 3 is fundamentally a great game. If you have no other way to play Hitman 3 and you own a Quest 3, you do now have access to one of the best stealth action games ever made, and you can play it in an immersive way that allows you to physically punch or strangle enemies, drag dead bodies around, dual wield weapons, and see these locations with a sense of scale, depth, and size that the flat screen version can't quite convey. But you'll have to accept some truly painful visuals and lots of not quite fully built for VR mechanics to enjoy this experience. Now, I'm sure I don't need to speak much about the visuals and glitches I've encountered, because whilst I've been talking about my experience, you've been seeing gameplay captured from within my Quest 3 that perfectly showcases just how the game looks right now, and I'm sure you'll all agree, it isn't pretty. Every time I load into a Hitman 3 VR Reloaded level, it takes me a few minutes to adjust to what I'm seeing. Those initial few moments in any given environment are extremely jarring. The flat, lifeless environmental objects, the washed out colour palette, shaky, jagged textures popping in and out as you move around, floating assets like bushes and trees, highly pixelated NPCs, and a shockingly small draw distance all hit you right in the eyeballs the second you load in. Then you start playing, and if you allow it to do its thing, Hitman 3 will start to win you over with its gameplay. The charm of the open-ended levels really does have a power over me, and I'll admit after 5 minutes or so in each level, I will start to forget the visuals and just start enjoying the experience. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe this is actually really good. And then bam! A pitch black room for some reason. A window that displays as a black square until you're a few feet away. An NPC sliding around on the floor because you've lightly bumped into them. Huge gaps in the terrain and buildings. The game always finds ways to bring you crashing back down to earth just when you start to have fun with it. The visual presentation is just that poor. The game does also seem to be plagued with bugs and glitches at this stage. For example, I've noticed a few instances of NPC or target AI not quite working the way it's supposed to. I've set traps for targets and then waited for them to go about their normal routes and tasks, only for them to completely stop moving for minutes on end, and they're only jogged back into action by me throwing an item near them to snap them out of it. The end of mission summary also seems to be completely broken right now. We're supposed to be greeted by a screen that displays all of the challenges we completed in that particular level, but instead it just displays every challenge and gives us no indication of which ones we actually managed to achieve. Then we see a screen that ranks our progress, and let me tell you, it has awarded me 5 stars and the Silent Assassin rank for every single mission success I've managed so far, including the Berlin playthrough where I murdered almost everyone in the club with dual SMGs without using a hint of stealth or tactics. Honestly, I think if it was just ugly, some players could excuse it, but Hitman 3 VR Reloaded is ugly and unfinished, which is a far worse crime. It's worth mentioning that there is a Day 4 patch coming at some point this week. I've heard that it may be ready on Friday, but the Day 4 moniker suggests it's coming much later. This patch is the first step on a long road to fix the issues of the game, but I'll circle back to my original point and say, why release it now? Why release it in this state? Why not fix it first and release it in February after the Christmas VR headset surge? It just screams external pressure, and it will likely be the reason this game dies.
That's Madam Carlyle taken care of. Time to get the file on Arthur Edwards.
Hitman 3 is a fantastic game. It's truly one of the best sandbox action stealth adventures of modern times, and it's a game I would recommend everyone play at least once. Hitman 3 VR Reloaded is sadly the worst version of that game, and to anyone tempted to pick it up, I'd say get any other version if you have the option to do so, because this shouldn't be anyone's only exposure to this incredible game. Can XR Games fix this and deliver a product that looks and feels great to play? Yeah, probably, but why did they choose to release it in this state rather than waiting until it was ready? Until it was a product they could be proud of, and a product that truly delivered on the promise of a Hitman VR game that feels as though it was built from the ground up for VR. Hitman 3 VR Reloaded can be fun if you can accept the wealth of issues and unacceptable presentation. That core gameplay loop is there to be enjoyed, but this shouldn't be the quality that Quest 3 or VR players in general have to accept to get their hands on great games. We deserve better, and XR Games can certainly do better.